so-called Big Six, as Malcolm characterized them. The same thing you see from 1963, you see now in 2014. You see white supremacists can't control it, so they finance a Washington trip and they pay for the actual buses. So you could have come from anywhere in America, got on a bus for free. It would take you to the march and take you back home. And this was funded by white corporate America, and yet the numbers weren't there because people are slowly but surely realizing that Reverend Sharpton and other civil rights leaders do not represent the black community, but they instead represent corporate America, and people are slowly but surely realizing that.
One of my disenchantment with these so-called civil rights leaders is they have millions and millions of dollars in their coffers. They have the national, international exposure, but they only get involved in these incidents once there is a horrific incident and people rise up. And as Michael stated, they attempt to jump in the front, so they can steer the direction of the movement. We've had brother Trayvon Martin in Florida. We have everyone from Amadou Diallo, where the community didn't get justice. But, months after we don't get justice, everything just dissolves into business as usual. And I think that's some of the frustration some of the residents in Ferguson are saying. We demand justice, we don't get it. This is going to be a prolonged movement. What are some of your thoughts on the march in Washington, D.C., as well as the marches that is taking place all over the country and all over the world?
Well, one of the things I think is important is that we have to decide who our leaders are going to be, as opposed to allowing someone else to determine who the leaders are going to be. I think that the youth in Ferguson have the right idea that they're going to take charge of this movement because it's coming from the grassroots organizations in Ferguson, from the youth who see that there needs to be a real change and some real demands made based on the issues that are occurring in these communities. So I think that as the dynamic starts to change, as everything starts to shift, and the youth start to realize that the people that are in control, the people that are the so-called leaders, I don't know who makes this determination, but who are the so-called leaders are not really calling for the same type of justice that the youth see that are needed in our communities, that they're deciding to take charge and control of the direction of these movements. I think that that's what we need to do, and I think that some of these old-time leaders and people who call themselves leaders need to step aside and allow the youth to do what they need to do to ensure that the things that need to be addressed in the community that are affecting us and them are truly addressed in a fair and impartial way.
Yeah, I thought also that when you consider the fact that, as people have pointed out, there were youth coming out of Ferguson that demanded some additional time to speak. I think that the traditional civil rights movements had picked a group from Ferguson to speak, but that young man appeared to be very effeminate, and I think that some people from Ferguson had a problem with that. Now, nobody's going to admit to that, but that person seemed to be extremely effeminate, that was up there smiling a little bit too much and acting in a way counter to what black leadership traditionally act. So I don't know what exactly he was representing, but this is why I think other youth from Ferguson and the surrounding areas had to speak their unspoken truth because of that person who they had picked. And the other thing that I thought was problematic is that people have waxed poetically after this march on Washington about how many whites are participating in that. They're speaking, every race, every creed, all this kind of stuff, similar to what they did in 1963. They're talking about here in New York and all these places about how great it was to see this white participation. And I would just caution everybody that while certainly everybody has a right to speak, I believe, as Malcolm pointed out, that whites should do their great work in their communities. They should not come into the black community and co-opt movements, redirect how things are going to be done, impose their agenda on the black community. I think they instead should challenge white supremacy and its institutions where they are, as opposed to trying to come into traditional black organizations and try to reroute them and tell them what to do while giving a few dollars in the process, trying to gain control of that movement.
All right, Julian, as we wrap up on this particular subject, the anger that is being manifested throughout the nation is this question of injustice as it relates to the criminal justice system, which everyone knows or should know. All statistics point to the fact that we have a dual system in our criminal justice system where blacks are treated unfairly, harsher sentences, more frequently arrested for crimes that, throughout the races may commit. And as it relates to specifically to police shootings, there's been an abundance of horrific police brutality cases and police killings that have gone unpunished, and that's at the core. There's been a lot of suggestions that this is a training issue, and that both communities need to respect each other, and then all of this is a diversion. Let me ask you specifically as it relates to New York City Police Department. Shouldn't there be some culpability for the police commissioner and the mayor with the role that they played? I mean, it's in 12 months of their administration, this individual that we thought was going to be such a great liberal, bringing people together. We have chaos in New York City as it relates to community of colors and the New York City Police Department. There's been numerous videos, accounts of police brutality and abuse, but everything has definitely been exacerbated under this present administration.
Well, absolutely, there should be some culpability. I think that we have to look at the entire administration. I think that everyone on every level should be held accountable to their role based on their position in this government and this administration. We look at how you talked about the duplicity and how policing and the justice system operates. We have to really be clear on how we respond to this duplicity. Now, we can talk about training, because that's something that you mentioned, but we have to understand every police officer, and we have this conversation all the time, every police officer gets the same training. I don't understand how training operates or manifests itself in the black community differently than it manifests itself in the white community. I think that we have to start holding police officers and everybody on every level of the administration accountable for what happens in the community. If there's a problem in the police department, and we're talking about some criminality based on how the law operates and how the police officers operate, hold them accountable. Regardless to where it happens, if there's a crime committed by a police officer, there will be a crime if committed by a civilian. That police officer is just as culpable as the civilian is. So let's utilize the same justice system that would apply for that civilian to that police officer when he commits the crime. And it's unfortunate that's not the case. And they'll try to use different words and philosophies and laws that will exonerate the police officer. But the bottom line is that if we're talking about someone being justifiably not culpable for the crime that they committed, if that applies for a police officer, then the same application should be applied to a civilian. The bottom line is that if you did something and you're justified in what you're doing as a cop or police officer, and you're justified as a civilian, both should apply. But unfortunately, that's not the way things are operating, or that's not the way we see them manifest themselves. We can look at whatever statutes in the law that fit on either side, but the punishment and the justice system should look at both of them the same. There should be no exception for a police officer as opposed to it being an exception for someone in the civilian population. So until we start holding everyone accountable equally, that's where we're going to continuously see the injustice. Now, with what you said, if the administration, meaning the mayoral positions, are not looking at this and dealing with it with the responsibility that they have in ensuring there's some equity in either discipline or the justice system, then they have to be held accountable. So to answer your question, everyone has to be held accountable on every level.
Now, Michael, the mayor and the police commissioner, the pundits, political pundits, so-called civil rights leaders, everybody talk about laws. There's enough laws, as Julian just laid out, there's enough laws on the book presently that are being ignored that was, that could have indicted this police officer. They talk about training. The training in the New York City Police Department is the best trained department on the planet. Can we use more training? Fine. But training wasn't the cause of these latest bad incidents that we have, and they talk about tactics. No, we already have tactics. So these are just deflections away from what the core of the problem was, as I heard you articulate so brilliantly, is the racial problem. You know, that's something that nobody wants to talk. The problem of these shootings, whether you talk about Ferguson and the New York City Police Department, is the white supremacist viewpoint of the African American. I don't care if they're a child like they was when that little young teenager was shot by the police, or if we're talking about
Well, he wasn't even a teenager. He was 12.
right, he was 12 years old.
To me,
right. So
right.
at the core of this is racism. The way white people, white society views African Americans and their treatment and their response to us is always is far too often overly aggressive. So, you know, training, tactics, I hate when people talk about that or emphasize that as if that's the answer. That's the answer, but that's the answer to a different question.
Well, the fact of the matter is, look, nothing undergirds white supremacy better than the police department in New York City. It's the largest police force in the world. I didn't say the country. I said it's the largest police force in the world. You know, well over 30,000. Now, when you consider the mayor and the police commissioner who are in charge of the police department, and these are staunch racists in their own right, and I'm very disappointed. Let me just say this for the record. I love Brother Eric Adams. That's my brother. I love him. We walked shoulder to shoulder for years. I'm very disappointed in these positions he's been taking recently. I'm disappointed in the cover that he's given to Police Commissioner Bratton. Very disappointed in the cover that he's giving to this mayor, de Blasio, for some ungodly reason. He is going on record, Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough president, has gone on record and say that de Blasio cares about young black men, and for him it's personal because every day when he sits down at his breakfast table, he's looking at his son. That is disgraceful, of the highest order. He does not connect his son in any way with the lives of black men and women over this city. It is reflected in his budget. It is reflected in his appointments.
That's right.
It is reflected in the way he covered and said that what happened to Brother Gurley was an accident. It only shows you that he is racist to the core. And for Eric Adams, who knows full well, it has nothing to do with training at all, because you don't get Eleanor Bumpers in the white community. You don't get a Sean Bell in the white community. You don't get an Amadou Diallo in the white community. And certainly you don't get a Louima sticks going up people's rectums in the white community. It has nothing to do with training. And Eric Adams knows that full well. I love my brother, and I'm just hoping and praying that he becomes more responsible in his words instead of covering for the mayor as he did. And I ignored it when he covered for Omar Edwards. I thought it was disgraceful for him to cover to support Raymond Kelly when a black police officer, Omar Edwards, was killed on 125th Street and 2nd Avenue, for Eric to stand with him and talk about training, and that somehow Kelly cares for black police officers, which is an outright lie. For him to do that and then to do this, to come out again and talk about for the mayor is personal in supporting black men and women, and he's the perfect person to revamp this situation. No, I don't condone that for a minute. I think that it's being disingenuous to our people, and I'm saying, brother, tread lightly.
Noel, when you talk about the role that race plays in these police shootings and these police responses, and no one wants to talk about it, I think you're 100% accurate. I think that if we had the same circumstances and there was a white police officer with a white suspect or someone that they were approaching, that the response and reaction to how they deal with that particular person wouldn't be the same. I was shown a picture earlier today, or a photo in the newspaper, where there was a female white screaming in the face of a white police officer, and he stood there, and it was a still shot, but based on the photo, it looks as if he just stood there and accepted her being less than an inch or two from his face, yelling and screaming. And as I looked at that photo, I said, now if that was a young black man or even a young black woman screaming in his face like that, I believe that they would have a different photo may have been taken with him being him or her being arrested, placed on the floor, put in handcuffs. So their response to us is totally different. And I remember one time I made a mention that there is a disconnect between the police department, local government, law enforcement, and the justice system with the black community. And when I say that, I look at, or my thought is that when they deal with us, they don't see equals, they don't see people from their community, they don't see people that they deal with day in and day out. They look at us and they see the enemy, they see the opposition, they see people that they have to police constantly, as opposed to people that they should be serving, because that's what they're there and called to do, to serve our community. So as we stand there and we look at this total racial dynamic, which I think, as Noel stated, so many people are trying to avoid, I think we have to embrace it, we have to look at it, it has to be discussed, and it has to be addressed. But if we close our eyes to it, then that gives them the opportunity to close their eyes to it as well. I remember on a few occasions where there were police-involved shootings and assaults, that family members would come out and say, I don't think race had anything to do with it. Now, why they took that position, I can't answer that. But I think that if we clearly look at what caused these officers or these people to respond to the person or people that they were interacting with at that time, I think that race definitely played a role, and that's something that we really have to acknowledge and discuss.
Right. I think it's counterproductive to make that admittance. And Michael, your point well taken with our brother Eric Adams, one of the co-founders of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Group Care. We responded to numerous shootings over the years, unjustified, and we always pointed out that training had absolutely nothing to do with being the problem. Like I said, no one's ever against training. You know, we can always use more training, but in terms of a solution to this problem, it has nothing to do with training. And when people suggest that, they're giving cover to the administrators, and we repudiate that as a tactic, because as Julian stated, unless you address the problem, unless you acknowledge what the core problem is, you're never going to get to an appropriate solution. So here to that. We want to move on to another issue. The torture report came out. The Obama administration had investigated the complaints of torture under the Bush administration as it relates to prisoners, and some of the most diabolical activities known to men that was conducted by the United States against these individuals that are being held, including force feeding up the rectum, including sexual assaults. And for me to hear individuals on TV attempt to justify some of these methods by saying, well, we got information that perhaps saved lives, as if the ends justify the means. It's preposterous that they would even engage. You know, I don't even want to hear a discussion, did these individuals, after these tactics were utilized, give up information? That's a B answer to an A question. Is the methods legal? And torture across the world is illegal. Michael, what were some of your thoughts on some of these disclosures? And I want to acknowledge a Barack Obama administration, even though he has this information, has decided not to prosecute anyone, and over 9,400 pages have been retained by the Obama administration. Right. And we know that these are some of the most what could be worse than force feeding somebody up the rectum? I mean, you put your food in your mouth and it goes through your throat, into your esophagus, to your stomach, to your intestines. Who would force feed somebody through the anus? That's preposterous.
Well, here's what. You know, I saw that during these Senate hearings, you heard every U.S. senator preface their remarks with saying that that torture is not an American exercise, that somehow this was something foreign to America. I would just remind those who might have forgotten, was Fannie Lou Hamer tortured?
Right.
Was Native Americans tortured? That black man you see in I think the book that you or Vernon introduced to me, Without Sanctuary.
Right, hundreds.
You saw that black man's back.
Right.
It was whipped so bad, he didn't even have a back. It was all callous. So when you look at the torture of even those in the Black Power movement under the COINTELPRO of J. Edgar Hoover, and you see the torture tactics that was used with them being in prison, and you know even basic things that was utilized with young men in the Central Park when it came to sleep deprivation and keeping lights in their eyes, forced confessions. These are all methods of torture. So before we even break down things like waterboarding, which to this day, Bush 43 says is not torture, and certainly his vice president, Dick Cheney, said that's not torture. Well, I don't see them volunteering to undergo it to see whether it's torture or not. So black men and women have been tortured ad nauseum for the past 400 years. And certainly when you look at the Irish rioting, the Irish when they were drafted in during the Civil War, and then they eventually became the police department, that anger towards black, that animism towards blacks still exists to this very day. So I dare say that for any elected official to claim that torture is not a part of American culture, they're lying.
You know, Noel, I have to agree with you. You know, sometimes, you speak and those thoughts are already in my mind. And, when we start talking about the ends justifying the means, I think that's just ludicrous. Let's talk about the actual torture itself. Let's talk about what was being done. Let's talk about the not even the dehumanizing, because I think it's even beyond that. What was being done to
demonic.
It's just so outrageous, and it's unfortunate that in the minds of some people in this country, whether it's the pundits, whether it's the media, whoever it is, they attempt to some sort of, and I don't know if justify is the right word, but try to rationalize how it was okay to subject anyone to some of these heinous acts, and then say, well, you know what? We got some information that may have saved lives. I mean, it's ridiculous, and sometimes we have to be able to equate these things to things that are closer to home, even though this is very close to home. When you start talking about the police department making arrests that aren't really justified, conducting illegal searches, obtaining evidence in false or inappropriate ways that violates the law and the Constitution, the end still doesn't justify the means. You have to use good tactics, legal tactics, justified tactics, fair tactics to attain this information. Why don't we just start attempting to use better means to obtain the information that we're looking? There has to be other ways to try to extract the information that we're looking to do, better intelligence. There's a multitude of things. Like when I talk about the police department, I talk about using good policing to obtain this information. Mm-hmm. These laws were put in place for a reason. For whether it's humanitarian reasons, whether it's legal, whatever it is, they're there for a reason. Let's attempt to outwit either the people that we're trying to extract this information from to get the information, but let's continue to be righteous, fair, and just in our attempts to obtain this information.
Father Lucas is here, as some of you seen, on the television. Father, Julian brings up a good point. Torture is a criminal offense under U.S. civilian and military law. Barack Obama administration has refused to prosecute any of these individuals. When I look at the pundits on TV, the people that they choose to interview, they come with all these reasons why it was justified, why it was useful, but they don't talk about it as illegal. And Julian brings up a good point. Whether or not it was useful, whether extracted information, is it legal? With the stops, if you come up with a gun by a legal stop, it's bad. Father.
Well, Julian and you and Mike, you really put it on. But what is even more diabolical, and when this is coming from Dianne Feinstein, who has been defending the CIA almost all her career, part of that report says there is not one bit of information obtained in this way that led to the capture of anybody. Mm-hmm. Not one. The nonsense about Osama bin Laden, that had nothing to do with torture. That had something to do with the U.S. Apparently supposed to be a vaccine distributed, say, from I forgot what the disease was, that it was these doctors there who used that ploy to get information that allegedly led to bin Laden. Had nothing to do with the torturing. So you're absolutely right. The end doesn't justify the means, but even in this case, there was no end
Right.
that you claimed that you were trying to do.
Well, Feinstein prefaced all of her remarks with that torture is not an American exercise.
Yeah, right.
Now,
Well,
Also-
you already blew that out the water.
well, yeah, and also we have to consider that actionable intelligence, the FBI seemed to be the predominant experts at it, and they said you gain nothing, absolutely nothing from torturing a person. Now they define torture as damage that's permanent. They consider that torture. So they say that if you tear somebody's fingernail out or their toenail out, that's torture. But anything you do that physically, that body is not in disrepair when that exercise is over, is somehow not torture.
And that's foolishness.
And that makes no sense at all. And I think that when you consider that, when all is said and done, it was the soldiers. They got a few charges. The Abu Ghraib, when they allowed Muslims that were there to be put on top of each other in a sexual way. They were both all naked and putting one man behind another man, and they was taking pictures of things like that. And when they sent those pictures back here stateside, and they got busted with that, those soldiers got charges. But from the outset, when President Obama came in, he made it crystal clear that no one from the CIA, and CIA was in charge of Abu Ghraib, CIA is in charge of Gitmo, all of these places where they have so-called terrorists at, they will not be charged because the CIA won't stand for it. And they've already reminded President Obama several times, people can reach out and touch him, they can compromise his security time, so they better not touch none of their people, which is the CIA.
Well, of course, Obama got very conscious when Jack Kennedy confronted the CIA, took demoted him from head of the CIA, that he doesn't want the same thing to happen to him. The point that Mike made again, but that was a specious which everybody else deny and call it ridiculous, a specious definition of torture, which Cheney's group drew up, an interpretation that nobody else has followed. And then to their credit, remember not only at Abu Ghraib, but at someplace else, the FBI confronted the CIA and said they would have no part of that.
Right. So it's unfortunate, Julian, you couldn't make the nexus between, this country, committing such atrocities and receiving cover by all the political pundits and no real outcry by these so-called leaders, and what's happening as it relates to the New York City Police Department and police departments throughout the nation, reacting similar with civilians in terms of their abuse and receiving cover by the political pundits. It's all a nexus. It's all a connection, and that's why it's encouraging to see so many young people in the streets throughout the nation protesting what's been happening. We really have to raise our voice and continue to do so. It's time. We want to, Julie. Before we go to our phone calls, Julie, why don't you tell us about a story that's happened in North Carolina with an individual that was found lynched?
Yeah, it was a young man that was found lynched in like a trailer park near his community. He was in a relationship with a white woman, and apparently or allegedly people in the community were opposed to this. He was found hung in a park or recreation area in that community, and initially the ME's office deemed it a suicide, and the family as well as the NAACP had questioned that. And now they have the FBI looking into the case, conducting an investigation because they believe that it was an actual homicide. There were people who made threats against him, saying that he should end the relationship, that the young lady should end a relationship. So now the FBI is looking into it. Father?
That was very interesting, too, that you brought out that while the authorities at first said it was a suicide, it was a rather interesting one. The family said he was wearing brand new expensive sneakers.
Right.
When he was found, they had an old pair of sneakers that couldn't even fit him.
Right.
So I imagine before he got
Well, we did say trailer park. Well, let me just say real quickly that when you look at these kind of situations, I think at this late date in our juncture, we have to understand the dynamics when a black man is having sexual encounters with a white woman, you know, what it suggests and what can happen. And certainly in her particular case, she had children. And one thing about white men, they have a problem with black men having sex with their women when there are children around. And for him as a young man, 17 or something like that, to be going into a household where they are teenagers there, she's a grown woman, you know, like 30-something years old, and for him to create, you know, that type of scenario around those children, white men feel that impacts on the children, knowing that their mother's being had by a black man that's creeping at night, coming in there, and they had a solution to fix that problem, and that's all that was. It was clearly they put their foot down that they would not allow any black man to come in there and have sex with a white woman in front of white children.
Well, okay. All right, well, let's go to our first phone caller. Welcome to Community
truth.
Cop. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Hello, first call. You on the air. Where you calling from? All right, we might be having some problem with our telephone calls. Do we have a call on the line? All right, we are having problems with our phone service. Getting back to, you know, and I hear your point, brother. You know, I just like when you describe him as creeping, you like you almost built him up to be like a criminal.
No,
No, but I'm saying your presentation.
Right,
you know,
right,
the words. You know, it said he was creeping around and almost as if the white man would
Well, she
justify.
was walking distance,
Right,
so he could actually walk to her house.
Right.
From his.
Well,
Right.
you know, the reality is that whoever he or she decides to date, that's their business. The real issue is that he was, the way it appears, unjustifiably murdered. And that's what we really need to talk about. The fact that his human rights and any right or who he decided to be in a relationship or whatever he decided to do was taken from him by the hands of people who were committing a crime by taking his life. So, you know, hopefully there'll be some kind of justice as we seek justice in all these unjustified killings of this particular young man.
And I would say there's not going to be justice in a particular case because you have to be conscious of who you're cohabitating with. He lived in that's a primarily white neighborhood. He was in the so-called minority. It's primarily a white neighborhood. He was bypassing a whole lot of white men to enter into a white woman. And they don't play that. They don't stand for that, and that's why they characterize it as a suicide. They said he took a belt, and that belt was not his. They used another belt, strapped his hands behind his back, and hung him with it. And so it's crystal clear that if you leave it up to that local district attorney and the local law enforcement agency, this will be unsolved. Even though the medical examiner had to come to the realization that it really wasn't a suicide, but at the same time, it's already been made crystal clear, message sent, signal achieved to the black community, stay with your own and leave those white women alone.
All right, do we have our phone lines open yet?
Yes.
Oh, welcome. How you doing, sister?
I'm fine, my brother.
Hotep, question or comment? Where you calling from?
Comment. A few weeks ago, Juliana made a comment about black on black crime, killing. Now, no black man or child has ever gone and done any kind of massive killings like 20 children in Sandy Hook and 2 teachers, as well as killing his mother. The other one is the one that shot up the theaters down south.
That's
I
right.
think it was in Texas and wounded a congresswoman and also killed a young girl.
That was Phoenix.
So Giuliani is really trying to make people think that we are the ones when we know who the killers are. And the first one that I remember, and I'm 76 years old, that was tortured, unbelievable, was Emmett Till.
Oh, right.
Okay? Emmett Till. So I think we dropped our books and lost our lessons.
That's right.
All right,
There's
sister.
a book and a
Go ahead,
DVD
sis.
out called African People and European Holidays. Until we as Africans stop celebrating European holidays because we took on whatever the slave master celebrated, we will never be respected and our lives mean nothing.
All right.
We spend more money with this killer than any other race. and I've been waiting to say this for about 2 weeks.
Well, thank you, sister.
Please call back. Please call back.
Thank you,
Call
sister.
back.
It's a pleasure hearing from you, and you hit all your points are poignant and right and exact. Thank you for calling.
Thank you, brother.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Calling from Brooklyn, brother from Brooklyn.
Okay, Maltep, brother. Quick question or comment?
Yes, I want to make a comment. There's three issues that I really want to stick to you guys. It's very important. Y'all was talking about the core issue and the core problem. The first thing that we really got to look at the big picture. It's jobs for these young youth, man. These young youth don't have the jobs. The economic equality equals justice. Everybody. It starts there. That's the basis of everything. Like the war on poverty and stuff like that, the battle cities, those are all gone. You know, things like that. Brooklyn is booming, and it's building everywhere. But the level of unemployment in the black youth and the black community stays the same. Everybody's working but the local community. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's the job. And another thing I want to address is that hate crime thing. When you say a hate crime, we've been lynched over 400 years. Or black this and black that. I've never heard somebody say that's a hate crime. That hate crime is usually for homosexuals or Jews. All right? Last
True.
week, a guy didn't start a Jew himself, and they were talking about a hate crime, a Jew amongst the Jews. That don't happen with us.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Okay. All right, excellent point, brother. We got a lot of phone calls. We got to go to another phone call, but excellent points.
Thank you.
All right, next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Next.
Hotel.
Hotel, where you calling from, sister?
I'm calling from Brooklyn. How you both doing?
Okay,
All right, how you
Brooklyn,
doing?
quick question or comment?
Okay, quick question. First thing first. I want to ask you, there's a double standard that exists in all areas of public life in the United States. And it's the Dred Scott decision of 1857, which was alive and well and power still factor. You're talking about training and trust in the police. The truth of the matter is, they need training, but that training that they need is at home. And when you're trained in racism at home, and you bring it to the force with you. That's first thing. Second thing is, I listen to your show, and y'all have a very good show. And I noticed that you've had automatics on your show in the past. I was wondering, is it any way possible that he may be making any update appearances on your show due to the fact that the Eric Gardner and all police and stuff? I was wondering whether y'all have him back on your show anytime soon.
Well, okay, all right, good question. But all Maddox, man, he has open invitation to Community Cop. You know, he can just walk on in.
Sister
anytime he
Pat,
want to.
Ultimatics knows full well he's always enjoyed an open invitation. So come on now.
And don't forget that all Maddox is very busy. You know, he has some issues that he's dealing with, you know, all over the country in cases and writings. But, you know, just in case he's listening or you get word from him, he knows he has an open invitation to Community Cop. But thank you for your call, sister. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hotel, brother, where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem. How are you
Okay.
all doing?
Okay, quick question or comment?
Quick comment first. These rulings in regards to torture, you have the constitutional professor who is now going to just, you know, wave his hand and this is going to go away. Now, we're living in a country that's dumb enough that might have Dick Cheney appointed again as president. And so he will have a precedent. Well, you have the constitutional professor say that it's okay, so it's constitutionally right. So we are setting ourselves up for, you know, a continuation of this, not saying that, you know, it ever ended, you know, to begin with. Secondly, when we talk about police departments here, I'm under the belief that most police departments came birth of out of the Fugitive Slave Act.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So you already have this ingrained attitude. So if you're going to change anything, that's the first thing you're going to have to put on the table. So how are you going to have a fair discussion changing anything? Well, you came out of the Fugitive Slave Act, and they still behave in this manner.
Right.
And you look at this particular man who is now mayor, how did he hire William Bratton? That is a slap in the face to all of us. And I wanted to ask y'all a question quickly. If y'all were to change the grand jury system, what would y'all, you know, say would be set up and be more fair?
Right.
Good
Okay.
afternoon, Joe.
All right, excellent points. And Michael, I know you spoke about, a lot of people don't know the police departments, the first police officers really were organized
catchers.
to return slaves that have ran away.
Right. Well, later, obviously, later on we had Fugitive Slave Acts, but certainly that's why the term paddy wagon, paddy rollers all goes back to the enslavement system. So it's a long history with the Irish going back several centuries. Europeans coming to this country with no particular skills, they could always become overseers and slave catchers, and this is what they did, and this is how they earn their living. And still to this day, when you see the disappearance of Klan types, the disappearance of White Citizens Council, you see the emergence of more of these guys in various police departments and sheriff departments across the country, still impacting on Black America.
That's very interesting. I hope it was being sarcastic when he said a constitutional lawyer said it's constitutional, therefore it is. Well, that's nonsense. This constitutional lawyer, unfortunately, is beholden to the system, and nobody else agrees that it's constitutional.
Yeah, okay, he said that because Bush 43 said it has to be right, torture has to be right, because his council, the House council, said it was right, so he said it can't be wrong, and Dick Cheney said if the president says it, it can't be torture. So I know why that caller said that, because you had this discussion, this so-called open discussion where you had the president, the vice president, and the House counsel, as well as the Justice Department going along with Bush 43, but it has nothing to do with the Constitution. That's a cabal of white supremacists doing whatever they want to do.
I know that, but he didn't make it clear that he was disagreeing with those idiots said.
Oh, okay. Right.
So that's why I made that.
But we have to remember, whether it be the police department, every single institution in this country, bar none, is built on white supremacy. This country is built on white supremacy. Nothing has changed. Every institution, whether you talk about the economic, whether you talk about the police, whether you talk about the courts, everything was set up for white men. And we haven't had a deviation from that as a philosophy. That's why we continue to have these problems. But
just quickly, let me answer his question. If you don't have the grand jury system, what is an improvement? The best improvement would make an open grand jury system.
That was my point. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And the same process, but open.
And a lot of these systems, the way they're constructed, would work if you had non-racist people in charge of them. You have laws that prohibit people from doing anything. You have laws, if the grand jury system, if the district attorney's office, if everybody wasn't racist, we wouldn't have these kind of decisions. When you see if it's a police officer, it happens one way. If it's a black defendant, it's one way. So, it's really the players involved in so many of these systems, because, did you look like you want to say something, huh?
No.
Okay. All right, but we're going to go to our next caller. Next caller, welcome to Community Cops. Where you calling from?
Hotep.
Mahotep.
I'm calling from the village of Harlem. I appreciate and respect everything your brothers are doing. I have one comment. I saw on the news this past week that a former cop he's going to do 10 or 12 years of jail time or prison time for trying to sell heroin, move it from the Bronx to Brooklyn. Now he gets all this time. He didn't kill anyone. We don't even know if he just had the intent to sell or if he sold everything. But these killers, they don't even get indicted. I don't understand that.
Right. Okay. All right. Excellent point. Thank you for your call, caller. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Assalamu alaikum, Kareem from home.
Okay, brother. Quick question or comment?
I just want to say this, brother. They've been killing black folks in this country for 500 years. That's torture. Why they ain't speaking about that? Obama is hiding the different reports that tell some of the most heinous things that they did in torture, and they've been killing us for 500 years with it. Second of all, this Negro that just called himself doing a march on Washington, Al Sharpton, walking around here with a prospect from 2014, is the biggest clown in the world. He goes out there and tries to take advantage of the people that was already out in the street for 4 months. Now, how you going to be ahead of something that people already been out there? They was in New York and he was in marching in Washington. Secondly, we need to come together, put our egos aside, and move forward as a people in this new coming year. And let's work together, brother, and do the right things to uplift our people.
All right.
Y'all be blessed, brother, and keep moving on.
Thank you, brother. And like the brother commented, over 9,400 pages of this terror report Barack Obama doesn't want to release to the public. And you can only imagine, what was in those papers. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
from New York.
How you doing, sister? Quick question or comment?
My comment is that, we should create our own political party that is much just, fair, impartial, and more sharing. One. The other thing is, what are these parties done in the last 237 years of the independence of this country? All that's going to make the rich richer, the poor poorer, and destroying the environment. So we need a change now. Right
Okay.
now, the only thing is that it's much easier. We have a federal police right now, and a better chance of going to jail or getting killed than getting a job.
Right, right. Okay, cool. It's kind of hard to hear you on your phone, but I think we got through most of your points. Thank you for calling. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Paige, where you calling from, caller?
Calling from Rockaway.
Okay, quick question or comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, yes, Eric Adams, he's in disgrace because he used the FOI in 1995 to get his name out there, out of Brooklyn. I was one of the FOIs. The foot soldiers, I'm down with the foot soldiers, but not the selected leaders. And I hope that somebody can get to our sons and daughters and say to them, those who are in American war and foreign countries and weapons of mass destruction, don't kill people who have not killed us. And those of us here who want to join American armed forces, tell them that they should tell them that we're not picking up our weapons to go to foreign countries to kill innocent men and women who have not done anything to us unless they come to this soil.
Right.
And I believe if we can do that, because they have that control of our children, we can change a lot of these laws in the United States because they use it as pawns to go kill for them.
Right. Okay, brother, we got the point. Good point about sending our kids to foreign countries to fight when there's really a fight here. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
I'm calling from Manhattan. I want to say good afternoon to you, brothers.
Good afternoon.
I congratulate you for the good work you do. I want to make a comment referencing the November 15, 2014 Wall Street Journal, which has a front page article called America World Cop. And it talks about America's obligation to be the cop of the world. It closes by saying, to say that the U.S. needs to be the world's policeman isn't to say that we need to be its preacher spreading the gospel of American way. Preachers are in the business of changing hearts and saving souls. Cops merely walk the beat, reassuring the good, deterring the tempted, and punishing the wicked. See, a policeman's job is not to punish anyone. A policeman's job is to bring an accused before the court of justice.
Right.
White people have it all confused by intent. And I just wanted to get that in as we reflect upon the torture that these white people commit all over the world. And it is just a mirror of the torture they've been accustomed to committing in its domestic circumstance.
Okay, excellent points, brother. Thank you for your phone call. Thank you for your comments. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yes, how your brothers doing? You all have a wonderful, wonderful program.
Thank you. Where you calling from, brother?
And I'm calling from the Upper West Side. My name is Robbie.
Okay, brother, Hotep.
Yes, Hotep to you all too. And when you look at the police killings and the police brutalities, and then what happens if it goes to a grand jury or makes it to the courtroom, then the case are usually dismissed. Then what happens is followed by civil proceedings, and usually much dollars are awarded to the victim's loved ones. And guess what happens? The taxpayers feel the burden of this payout.
Right.
Now, I've been talking for decades. What would stop police brutality immediately is that you don't have the taxpayers pay. You have the police that was involved have them, seize their bank accounts, the pensions, the homes, cars. Then you go to the precincts where the accused came from and make them pay. Then the final payout would be from the police union.
Right.
And I bet there would be immediate turnaround, and Patty Lynch would be running to all the police stations and talking about behave.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's my comment. I really believe that would work. There probably has to be situation.
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
believe that would work. And I thank you so much for
Right.
taking my call.
Thank you for your-
peace and health.
All right, peace, brother. Thank you for your comments. A lot of people agree with that there should be some culpability financial for the individuals involved. But presently, as Julian, as you know, they're indemnified and they're covered legally against from any financial lawsuits. Julian, closing comments.
You know, we always talk about what we have to do collectively, politically, and economically. I think it's time we stop talking about it and we start doing it. Dad, I love you. Karen, best of health. Leader family, nothing but love for you guys. Best of health.
There was a time where we thought of lawyers, we thought of Charles Hamilton, Houston, Thurgood Marshall, Shockway Lumumba, Alton Maddox. Now we're being told that Crump and Park and all these guys are the new civil rights attorneys. We going backwards. Reinstate Alton Maddox.
It's very interesting. It looked like Patrick Lynch has somebody who's trying to rival him in stupid statements. When he could come out with an idiotic statement that the mayor should not come to police funerals, I was under the impression that the police worked for the city and not for the union. And it's the city that pays their salary and not the union. And the mayor is a representative of the city. So how are you going to tell him for what funeral he could come to and not? It's stupid.
All right, on behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank our engineers and producers, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, Veronica Kitt, Brother Nolan, Toppin. We'd like to thank you for watching. Thank you for calling. A little more. I love you, Mr. Harper. We love you. Kitty Cat, love you. See you next Tuesday, 5 o'clock. So much this. We need another hour, man. No, this hour goes by too quick. But thank you for watching. See you next Tuesday. Knowledge to the wise. I think it's time to say peace. Reinstate Alton Maddox.
Let's face the music and dance. Before the fiddlers have fled, before they ask us to pay the bill, and while we still have the chance, let's face the music and dance.